Hey, what's up, comrades? Hope everyone's doing great. If I'm a little quieter here, it's because I'm hanging out in the field training exercise, bored out of my mind. And let's see, make sure everything's recording. Oop, nope, I turned it off. Okay, it's back on. All right, cool. So we're here to talk about Dragons of Winter Night, which is the second book in the Dragonlance trilogy. So we begin with the prologue. In the dwarven home that the companions found for all the refugees, a bard sings a song. This is pretty much summing up book one. We then move to this ceremony. Elliston is giving a hammer, the hammer, in fact, that forged the original Dragonlances to the dwarves in return for their, like, the human safety. And then Sturm and Tanis talk about this apparently kick-ass fucking adventure that occurred where they like led the people to like the Dwarven kingdom and they don't let them in if they found this hammer, and they went and found the hammer and all sorts of like shenanigans occurred and whatnot. And this book is odd because this happens like two times, I think, like here and then later on there's like a whole adventure that they just be like, wow, wasn't that a crazy adventure we went on? And I was like, why didn't you talk about that adventure? Like, that sounds badass as hell. There's actually a book, I don't know about the future adventure, but there's like the Lost Tales of Dragonlance or something. I remember reading this like 30 years ago, where this is one of them where you'd actually focuses on Flint and Tasselhoff and the rest of the crew as they like find this hammer for this whole like adventure. And it was pretty cool. I don't remember that much about it. I just remember being like, oh, that was cool. But again, I read it like years ago. But in this book, it's just like, hey, we had this awesome adventure. Remember all that cool stuff we did? And like, I can't believe we're giving the hammer to forge a Dragonlances to these guys. I'm like, what? And there's like a whole ceremony and stuff. And then at some point, Tanis is like really struggling with being underground because elves and shit. At some point, Tanis and Sturm like leave the ceremony. They talk about going to Tarsus because Tarsus is like the beautiful with like ships and something. And then they argue about the hammer, about Dragonlances, about Solamnia, how they should have taken the hammer to Solamnia to redo the Dragonlances or something. And then Sturm's angry about this whole situation. And Tanis is like, I'm so tired of arguing, bro. And then at some point, Raceland shows up. And like sourpusses the mood, causing Sturm to storm off, which ends the prologue. We then start with book one, chapter one. Tanis is sitting on the Council of Seekers, which is like the humans. Elliston is the boss here because he obviously is a true cleric of Paladine at this point. But there's a lot of dissenters based on what like the next object is. One of them is the Hedwig guy from Solus. Like, that motherfucker's still around being an asshole. So they decide that Tanis is going to lead a small group to Tarsus to check out the war situation, see if it's spread worldwide, to check on ships and all that stuff, and figure out what these guys should be doing next. Raceland gets up and rants about how they're all fools and stuff, which is awesome. Afterwards, Tanis goes and meets with Ellistan and Lorana. I talk about Raceland and his negativity, and then Lorana and Tanis step outside the talk. She apparently has matured from this previous adventure we did not get any part of. And they've grown apart. Oh no. Tanis admits to himself that he is much more conflicted about his human and elf sides than he was in the previous adventure. She then leaves him after they have like a little spat, and he camps outside. The next day, the companions start their journey. So we move over to Tarsus, right outside it, with the Blue Dragon Sky. He's upset that he had to come south to capture Tarsus, but the High Lord insisted upon it. When questioned about it, the High Lord brings up 3 people from the companions. Who exactly? Mystery for now. And but that is why they're here. Anyway, so back to the companions. Tanis just does a review for the team about like stuff that happened in the first book and thinks about stuff generally. Then the companions head out. They reach the hill overlooking Tarsus, and wah, 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 no water. It's landlocked since the Cataclysm. So the maps that Tasselhoff had that they were like counting on are all pre-Cataclysm. We then get like a little fun history of Tarsus. It was a major trade hub protected by the Knights of Solamnia, and then after the Cataclysm, the Knights drove it off. It became landlocked. People became very isolationists, and the companions roll down there in daybreak. The companions head to the Red Dragon Inn, Some guards and the innkeeper are very concerned about them. They chat about this, chat about what to do next. Elliston and the barbarians, Goldmoon and Riverwood, will go back to the humans, and the rest will go with Storm north. There's an argument between Raceland and Sturm. Sturm is growing more wary of Raceland as time goes by. Him and Tanis notice that Raceland is getting more and more powerful. At some point, Tanis wanders off, and then later on, Lorena and Tanis are arguing about Tanis being a little bitch. When Tanis hears Tasselhoff give a warning, so they prep for what is to come. Tanis, Flint, Tasselhoff, Sturm, and Gilthanis all stay to confront these guards that are coming to arrest them, and the rest will go upstairs and then will flee afterwards. Raceland tells them some of them will never meet again, which is super fucking ominous. They then get to a standoff with the guards, and Raceland drives them off so they don't come upstairs to harass the rest of them. And at this point, the companions separate to never fully come back together again. So at this point, Lorena has a little fun conversation with Raceland. They talk about his past and how his mother was a clairvoyant and that he's got a little bit of that also. But it didn't help her much because she married some guy, had Kitiara, they fell out of love, and eventually the guy just like, nope the fuck out. And she remarried the twins' dad. He died. He was like a farmer or factory worker or something, and he had some work accident. Then she died. Wah, 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 because she lost control of her powers. At that point, they are joined up with then the twins joined up with Tanis, Tasselhoff, Flint, and Sturm. Later on, Kitiara, who's like a mercenary and was out doing mercenary shit, she joined up as well. Then, after Flint retired from metalworking, they all split up to find the true gods, so she gets the whole kind of shebang story. Meanwhile, the rest of the crew, so what was it? It was Gilthanis, Sturm, Tanis, Flint and Tasselhoff are getting harassed by like people outside as they're being dragged off to like this prison or whatnot because they don't like, well, one, they don't like elves, and Gilthanis and Tanis are like elf enough. Well, Gilthanis is an elf, but Tanis is elf enough. And then Solamnianites they like really hate because there was like the whole thing where the Solamnianites just kind of like noped out of helping people or something. Anyway, Tasselhoff has like a special taunting Kinder ability. Which I vaguely remember from when I played the modules for this like decades ago. And I was like, God damn, Kinder are the best. I remember playing one. Oh, so much fun. Anyway, so then he gets a riot started, and then the Kinder gets nabbed up, and the rest of the companions end up in like this funny trial, which gets interrupted when Alana, the princess of the Sylvanesti elves, who remember there was like the Qualinesti and the Sylvanesti, and they had like a Kinslayer wars, and so she's like the Silver Elf queen or princess. She gets brought in, and they're like, you were told to leave, but you're still here looking for mercenaries. And then Sturm like helps her, and they instantly fall in love. Oh. Anyway, he helps her with this item that she dropped, and then the crew all go off to prison. They rescued pretty quickly by some Solamnianites and Tasselhoff. They take them to the old city, which is not occupied anymore. Once there, Gilthanis introduces Tanis to Alhana, the princess. Gilthanis refers to Tanis as the son of his uncle's wife, which super confused me. So I had to fucking ask ChatGPT and look at some wikis and stuff. All right. So, because I thought Tanis was the son of... so Tanis' mother is an elf. I thought his mother was related to the Speaker of the Sun. But it's actually, so this woman that is Tanis' mother, I found out, was married to the Speaker of the Sun's brother. And so there's like no relation because she got the rape and had him. So he's not biologically related to Lorana or Gilthanis or anybody. And I was like, okay, that makes a lot more sense. The confusing thing was in the first book, the Speaker of the Sun references Tanis as being his sister's son, which, yes, that is true because she's a sister-in-law. Okay. But anyway... It makes more sense. So him and Lorna aren't related by blood, so there's no fun incest in this game. Sorry, fellas. Anyway, they talk about the Sylvesti elves, how they fought the dragon armies, but they also fled from their homeland, just like the Qualinesti. Aside from her father, she stuck around. She's the speaker. He's the Speaker of the Stars, right? Speaker of the Sun, Speaker of the Stars. He stayed, and he mentioned to her before she left that he had some way to protect the kingdom. Sturm ends up coming back with the other knights after they have like a little chitty chat because they found some ancient library. Also, Tasselhoff apparently has magic glasses that he picked up from somewhere. I think he picked them up from Paxaroth or Pax Tharsis from the first book, and this allows him to read any book, magic or otherwise. Oh no, I'm sorry. He found them in the side adventure that we got not with when they were looking for the hammer. Goddamn game. Anyway, so Raceland confirmed to him that they were magic and that they would do it. They would let him read magic and all that. He tells him about the chromatic dragons, also that there were orbs that used to control dragons, and then they hear the sound of the dragon arming approaching. So the dragons invade. Lots of crazy stuff happens. The important stuff is that Sturm runs off with Alana. They both realize they love each other some more or something. She gives him this pin, and then they say goodbye. And then she summons her quote-unquote friends to help her. Meanwhile, Riverwind takes charge of the inn. Guys, they decide that they need to hunker down. He sends everyone but Caramon and Raceland downstairs. They can talk about suicide and stuff. And Raceland is like, don't worry about it. We'll be fine. Tanis and Gilthanas race to the end. Gilthanas somehow got his leg hurt, so he puts him to hide and watch what's going on. And then Tanis gets mobbed. He finds Flint with Tasselhoff, who is injured. And then he has Tasselhoff help Flint while he... Oh, no, help... So he leaves Flint to help Tasselhoff, and then he heads to the end where the friends are fighting... this like losing battle. Tanis comes in and they're about to leave when this dragon comes and crushes the inn on top of them. So Tanis tosses Lorana to Elliston at the door as the inn is like caving in. So they're able to make it out. And then the rest that are stuck in the inn are saved by a spell from Raceland. Outside, Sturm finds Gilthanas and they team up with Flint and kill some Draconians, rescuing Elliston and Lorana. Then Sturm gets everyone back into the fight by getting them to focus on survival and that they got to get the fuck out of there. He gets his and Tanis' sword, the dragon or the Elf King sword, and then they move out. Meanwhile, in the cellar of the inn, Raceland awakens, and he's like, "I'll tucker the fuck out," because he used his last spell, which is some sort of barrier. Anyway, so they're all good. Tika, Goldmoon, Riverwind, Caramoon, and Tanis, but. So they're all trapped, and there's like water leaking in there. And then they start to hear goblins and draconians digging them out. For the High Lord, ruh-roh. Then they hear this like crazy bird sound, and then all the creatures dying. And then they get dug out, and then standing there is Alana with a lot of griffins. Hooray! A bit later, or meanwhile, a red dragon goes off to kill the companions, and he gets stopped by a blue dragon, the blue dragon High Lord, because he wants them captured alive. Hold on, let me pause this when the helicopter flies over. All right, I think it's gone now. Okay. So, yeah, because he wants them alive. Then we see that the griffins come, they take them away, and then the dragons pursue. The griffins are much faster than dragons, so they're able to, like, kind of get out of there. And then they fly to, like, hide out in this cave system. And they talk about what to do next. Ahana is taking them to solve the problem at her homeland with her father. And then she brings up the dragon orb. Tanis asks Raceland about it, and he becomes very, like, interested in this whole situation. He talks about... And it seems like he's possessed by some other force. He talks about the 3 moons, which everyone's like, no, brother, there's only 2 moons. There's the red moon and the white moon. And he's like, there's a black moon. And then also about the creation of the orbs and this like whole story about wizards creating it and controlling dragons and stuff. He then comes out of this like possession trance, and they press him about it, and he's like, I don't remember talking about anything. And he says, the only thing I know about the orbs is that you need a master who's as powerful in magic or they will be consumed. Then he goes to sleep. Tanis follows Alana outside, and they talk about her father, that he probably tried to use a dragon orb. And she mentioned something about how he stole it from the tower when it was taken, like the Tower of Magic or whatever, back in the Cataclysm days, and that he may be in lots of trouble. Then they talk about Sturm, the pendant she gave him, how it creates a bond between lovers, and how she can track his emotions with it and keep an eye on him. And Tanis is like super concerned about Storm and about all this dragon shit and whatnot. At some point, the dragons refuse to go any further. Instead of just going straight into Sylvanesti, they're like, nah, bitch, we're good. And Alhana can't figure out why. So they end up taking this like ferry over this scary like blood-filled river or whatever, and everyone's like super uneasy. And then all of a sudden the whole world changes. They see the companions that aren't there, like Sturm, Lorana, Tasselhoff, and Flint. And then they all get like attacked by these undead like undead Gelsey elves. Rayson makes some pact with some hidden part of himself, and then it's an adjustment to the pact he made in the tower, and this allows him to be able to like change the future. After he agrees to it, his robes change to black. He then creates a barrier for everyone. Sturm's like, fuck you, I don't trust you, and like wanders off, so Tanis goes to follow Sturm. And Raceland is just like, whatever, let him go. And then he explains to Tanis before Tanis runs off that they're stuck in the speaker's dream, and if they have to remember they're in a dream so they can wake up. It's like his nightmare. And that their own nightmares and bad thoughts are being pulled in as well. And the thing they got to do is wake up. Raceland's already awakened, but he stays here to help his friends, and then Tanis runs off to help Sturm. The nightmare is super trippy. A lot of random points of view, like Flint sees himself getting old and gets stabbed by Tika. Tassoff finds her fighting for her life. He tries to unlock this tower. She gets killed, and then he gets killed because there's a trap on the door. And then Tanis meets up with Sturm, and Kidiara is there. And they think about Raceland's betrayal, that he wants to get the dragon orb so he can betray them and do some evil shit. And we see Raceland stealing life essence from Karaman as Karaman's trying to help him, and then he leaves him to die in front of the tower, and then Riverwood and Goldmoon get attacked by their tribesmen. Tanis eventually makes it over to the tower with Kidiara and Sturm. They find Lorana and a dragon. Sturm attacks the dragon despite Raceland's warnings and dies. Lorana goes to help, gets attacked, and so does Kidiara, and then Raceland starts fighting the dragon. Tanis clutches the gold ring that Lorana gave him, and then he wakes up and he finds Raceland standing there in like a hallway and back in his red robes and everything. We talk about the nightmare, and Raceland mentions that he defeated the dragon in the nightmare, which drove him away because he essentially like overpowered him. Super great. So he's totally gone. Raceland's very weak now, and then Karaman comes rushing in, and they talk about the others, but Raceland leads them to the Tower of the Stars, and there the speaker of the stars is like a husk. He's like barely alive, and he's grasping on to the dragon orb like very intensely. And Alana's there, and she mentioned that she heard Raceland say something about, oh good, Paris back. She mentioned something about Raceland saying something about it being a nightmare, and then she was able to like very easily like free herself after that point. Karaman takes her away because she's like completely distraught about this whole thing with her dad and whatnot. Raceland frees the speaker from the orb with some of his magic, and the guy starts to scream, and so Alana like runs back in, and Karaman carries him to bed and calms him down a little bit with Alana. Tanis is about to go out and look for Tika, Goldmoon, and Riverwind, but then they just like come in and they all embrace and get ready for some rest if they can after the nightmare. Eventually they do. They like pass the fuck out. The only one who doesn't is the speaker of the stars. He like recollects how he got here, thinks about his daughter. She's like laying there in his bed by his bed waiting for him to wake up. So she wakes up, they talk briefly, and then he dies. Over with Sturm and the rest, they also awaken, having lived through the exact same nightmare. So Flint, Lorana, and Sturm, they really don't want to talk about it, but then Tassoff runs, and he's like, all right, this hilarious dream. God damn it, I love Tassoff so much. We're back in Sylvanesti, and the companions did something, and they're like, man, shut the fuck up. Anyway, they get ready to leave, and we're back with like the companions in Sylvanesti. Alhana gives Raceland the dragon orb and a bag of holding, which is super nice because now we can like carry it, and then they secure the whole thing. She's going to go find her people, and then she wants to help fight, and then maybe someday reconnect with Sturm, and then they can return here. Tanis and the rest then head out towards the Tower of Magi, apparently. They get like sidetracked hard from that whole situation. But then we wrap up book 1, and then we go into book 2. So book 2 starts off with this whole fucking poem from this like winter barbarian tribe about destroying dragon place and like fighting walrus monsters and all this stuff. And this is the thing I mentioned before, like with the dwarf, where they like, this poem is like, man, that sounds like fucking epic. What is this about? And then chapter 1 starts, and it's like the companions are like, remember those awesome adventures we just had? And I was like, you fucking serious? Like they killed like a high lord of like the white dragons who was some crazy powerful wizard or something, and there were like dire wolves and walrus monster people and like all this other shit, and they found a dragon orb and a dragon lance, and I was like, the fuck. They also found a silver dragon encased in ice. Sturm then tells Lorana that the Knights of Solamnia are in that there's like some issues with the Knights of Solamnia, that they've kind of lost like they've lost the purpose of the Knights, and they've become very politically driven, and that a lot of them think Homa is a myth, and that this whole thing with the knight riding the dragon, the silver dragon, and the dragon lance that he holds, like the Derek, who's like the leader of these other knights. Oh, and like there were 3 Knights of Solamnia, and like 2 of them died in these like crazy fun adventures, so there's just Derek and Sturm at this point, and it's like, Jesus Christ. And then he mentions that he really misses his friends like Tanis and whatnot, and she's like, yeah, I do too. So then they travel by sea to Solamnia. And then, yeah, so there was like they didn't fight the dragon, but there was like a white dragon, right, the white dragon High Lord or something. So then they notice a white dragon chasing after them, and the dragon doesn't know what to do, because white dragons are like the stupidest of the chromatic dragons. Because she's like, I need to get that orb for my queen because I done fucked up and she's gonna want it. But if I like freeze the ship, then if I do like I blast the ship, it'll sink, and then she's gonna be pissed because I'll lose him. You know, she's just got a lot of issues. Eventually, she tries to freeze the ship, but then she drives it into rocks on the shore. Lorna eventually gets on the land, and shoots her through the ring, not the wing, not the ring, the wing. Several of the crew members die, but most people survive. The White Dragon gets driven off by Lorna, like fighting with it. And don't worry, some red shirts die, but all the important people live. So then there's a big argument, and then they get attacked by Sylvanesti elves. Lorna intercedes and shames them into calming the fuck down. The Sylvanesti at some point knock out Gilthanas because reasons. And then there's a lot of like elf and human racismos here going back and forth. And Lorna eventually goes off with the elves while Sturm and Derek and Flint argue about what to do and yada, yada, yada. Lorana returns. She's super pissed. Apparently all 3 elf races are here, the Qualinesti, Sylvanesti, and the new one we haven't talked about, the Wild Elves, the Kaganesti. Which would be like wood elves in like other Dungeons and Dragons adventures or campaign settings. As soon as the Qualinesti and Sylvanesti elves got here, they split the island in half, and they start having racismos towards each other. And the Kaganesti are getting abused by everybody. And Lorana's like super disappointed by this whole thing and how the elves are acting. At this point, the Sylvanesti agree to take Lorana's group to her father, the Speaker of the Sun, and then they acknowledge these. Then a Kaganesti elf maiden comes to cure Gilthanas using some druidic magic. Her name is Silvara, and she joins the group at this point. The crew get treated very badly by the Qualinesti elves. We find out that Porthos, who's the older brother of Gilthanas and Lorana, he's like one of the main drivers of like all the issues here, along with the guy who is like the Prince Regent for the Sylvanesti elves, and also apparently that is Alana's fiance, quote unquote. And then they're having like this huge argument. No one wants to hear from Lorana, and in fact, her father calls her a whore, which causes her to faint. When she wakes up, she speaks with Silvara and Elistan. She decides she's going to have to take the orb and take her friends, and they're going to head north. And then so she goes and gets Gilthanas on it too. Elistan decides he's going to stay and try to talk to the elves. Because Paladin has told him to do that, and he's like a simp for Paladin, obviously. He's his only cleric in the world. So her and Silvara, they go sneak into like her parents' bedchamber while they're passed out, and they get the orb, and then they grab the lance, and they're about to grab Tanis' magic sword, but they leave it there because they can't carry all this stuff. Gilthanas decides she's going to go with them, and they also get, what's his name? Thorin, who was the blacksmith who was friends with Gilthanas all the way back in Solace, all the way back in the first book. And apparently he came here with the elves. Remember, they like took him to the Qualinesti elves, and then they left him there to like get healed up. So he came with them over here, and he lost his arm to the Draconians. And at some point he had like, this is the 3rd time. I knew there was another adventure. So he had some like fun adventure where he went and he like talks about how he's like, I did all this cool stuff. You have to ask me about it another time because it was a badass adventure, and the gods showed me this like special metal, the special silver, and I was able to like construct this arm, and it's a blessing from like Paladin and the true gods and all this stuff. And I was like, the fuck? It's another. There's 3 stories. This book just like, don't worry about it. It's like really hand wavy. Like the fuck. Anyway, like it sounds so badass, but no more of that. So while they're leaving, Silvara carries the orb, which changes size to accommodate her, and then she thinks some cryptic shit about stuff in her head, and how the orb has chosen her and whatnot. So they head up river. The River of the Dead is what it's called, and they meet up with some of Silvara's people, some of the Kaganasti elves. Kaganasti. And they row, but then they hear horns indicating the Qualinesti are in pursuit. Gilthanas and Silvara are definitely into each other. We start getting like a lot of them like flirting and looking at each other and being cutesy and stuff. At some point, she tells the story of the Silver River, the River of the Dead, how the tears of like a silver dragon that Homo was in love with, and when they realized they could not be together, the dragon like cried tears into the river, which makes it look silver at night when the moon's rising and whatnot. She seems very affected by the story, Silvara does. And then after they make landfall, Thorin tells Lorana a bit about Silvara, that she's very mysterious, that she's very good at healing. And then Lorana starts to get very concerned about her. After all this like fun adventures, it's time for the companions to rest on the side of the river for the night. Except Gilthanas, because he's super horny. So he goes to look for Silvara, who's bathing in a nearby pond. She gets scared, but then he confesses his love to her, and they fuck. The next morning, they find that the elves are close. The Quanesty elves. They move out, but come under attack. Derek and Sturm take the dragon orb. Oh, so they come up with a plan. Derek and Sturm are going to take the dragon orb off to Solamnia to do that thing, and then the others are going to create an avalanche to hide their tracks, and then purposely make tracks for them to follow. So Silvara's personality changes a bit here. She becomes very forceful because she got laid. Not really. There's like another reason, but I thought that was hilarious. Anyway, everyone notices it, and then they start becoming like even more concerned. And then they get out, and then like Silvara puts them in like a trance, and then she says some cryptic shit and refuses to answer any of their questions. But so they follow her. And then they get to this fog-laden land that leads to like this bridge, and Silvara does some more cryptic shit and causes the fog to disappear, which reveals a giant silver statue of a dragon. And she's like, "Welcome to the tomb of Homa." Shit. They approach very cautiously, and then they see the statues of their friends. Like Tetanus is there, and Silvara says, "This is good because if you had bad intentions, you'd see monsters. Because you have good intentions, you see the people that you actually care about." Once inside, Flint mentions that the dragon statue outside was not made by any creature in Krynn, meaning at least no creatures in Krynn that exist in these days, and that it must have been created by dragons. Lorana then hears magic being cast, and they all fall asleep. Of course, Tassoff knows how to avoid sleep spells. That's like one of his expertises. So as soon as he hears like the sleep spell being cast, he wanders out of there, or he avoids it, and then he wanders out and finds Silvara crying and talking to someone about an oath and about love and stuff. Tassoff then goes to this like hole that they had found earlier, and like someone was like, "Oh, we better not go down there." And he sees some jewels in there, so of course he tries to take them, and he gets blown all the way to the top of this place. There he finds another beautiful dragon mural, like in Pax Tharkus, that he had been like, Fizban had made him like forget, and he's like, "Wait, this looks so familiar." And then Fizban's there. Fizban's alive, crazy. And then they have like this fun, crazy conversation. After some more crazy talk, Fizban leads Tassoff back to the others. He dispels the sleep spell. And then when they all wake up, Silvara like freaks out, and then Fizban, and so he casts a spell like before they get down there, and then when she notices everyone waking up, she freaks out, and then Fizban lands, and he like rips the fuck into her about the oath and several other things. Then he notices Lauren on the others, and he goes back to being like a foolish old man, and tells her she can do what she wants, but she knows the consequences to Silvara. He then leaves with Tassoff. He's like, "I gotta go to a big meeting. I'll talk to you guys later. Come on, Tassoff." Tassoff's like, "All right, guys, see you later." After they're gone, Flint like wakes up because I guess he was extra sleepy. He tries to go after Tassoff, but the others convince him to stay. Silvara then shows them her shadow, and we find out that dun dun dun, she is a silver dragon, and not just any silver dragon. She's the silver dragon that was, or she's the sister of the silver dragon that was in love with Homa. Holy cow! She then bestows upon Thorin the ability to make dragon lances, which wraps up Book 2, leading to Book 3. Chapter 1: Tanis and crew come to a tavern. They make friends with the barkeep. His name's like Pigface or something, but he loves it because he's the greatest bro of all time. And then Raceland does some like fake magic tricks with illusions for some of the bar people, and they all love it so much. Then the Raceland comes up with this plan. He's like, "We need money, we need like a plan of action, and we need to be able to travel safely. So what we're going to do is pretend to be like this like traveling band of performers." And so Tika gets like a sexy dance costume, which is like super nice. And then she does sexy dances, and then Caramoon and Tanis join in like the show. So Raceland's doing magic tricks, Tika does sexy dancing, Caramoon and Tanis do like a variety show, like throwing daggers or feats of strength or whatever. And then finally Golden Moon's like, "I will sing," and so she sings about the true gods, and Tanis is like, "Uh-oh, fuck us." But it ends up like even the Draconians like it, and they become super famous, and they change their name to like the Traveling Red Wizard Circus or something, and they travel around. Meanwhile, over with Sturm and the Solamnic Night Council, it's a fucking mess. There's all sorts of factions, lots of infighting, lots of political maneuvering, and Sturm is being condemned by Derek for being disobedient. Also for falsely wearing the armor of the knighthood. Uther, who's the acting head of the order, is on Sturm's side. He was like a big friend of Sturm's father. So the trial goes against Sturm. He has to stop wearing the armor, but then they induct him into the Order of the Crown, which is the lowest level. There's like Order of the Crown, Order of the Rose. That might be the highest order. An Order of... I don't remember the last one. Anyway, and then he puts him in charge of the Crown Knights that are heading out to meet. So they're going to Palanthas to like fight against the Dragon High Lords, and they're going to talk about like the Dragon Orb with like the elves and whatnot. No, they're just going to go to defense. And then Uther is going to meet with the elves and figure out what to do with the dragon orb. Derek is super pissed about this whole situation. And then Sturm has a nice talk with Uther afterwards about how Uther like bent over backwards to like help Sturm out and make sure that he could, he went to bat for him, and kind of like Sturm got the least negative punishment that was possible, and the whole moment is like very sweet. And at that point, the knights head out. We then jump back over to Tanis and company, and they're almost ready to sail off. They've made enough money and moved it all to where they need, and they've moved to float some, I think, where they need to be. Raceland does some reflection on the time, and then he thinks to himself how this was like, he's generally happy during this time, which is like one of the first times in his entire life he's just been like generally happy. And then at some point no one's around, so he pulls out the dragon orb, and then he battles it and win. And so him and the dragon orb like join forces, and then he's super tired, so he goes for a little napopotamus. Meanwhile, Karamoon and Tika are together in the woods. Ooh, but no fucking, because Karamoon is pledged to his brother, and he cannot pledge himself fully to Tika, and so as long as he can't pledge himself fully to Tika, he will not take her virginity, because that's not doing her right. And he's like the greatest bro of all time. Good for him. He'll still do some kissy though. Anyway, he mentions that he knows Raceland will save the world, and then at some point they hear Tanis calling for him, and so the companions gather around Raceland. And he's with the orb, and they're freaking out. And then Raceland like wakes up, and he's like, "What? Everything's fine. I just need some rest." You assholes. Back over with Uther. Not Uther. I'm sorry. I kept calling him Uther for some reason. It's Gunther. So anyway, it's almost Yuletide. Lord Gunther heads home to like his mansion or his castle or whatever. Upon arriving there, he learns that Tasselhoff and Fizban are paying him a visit. Comedy ensues because of Tasselhoff and such, and then Fizban asks about the dragon orb. Gunther, he mentions that he gave it to the gnomes, and then we get a short history about the gnomes. There's like a whole thing. These gnomes are like clearly what WoW gnomes are based on. They're short, they talk a lot, they're very like technologically and tinkering based, and they're like very kind of like scatterbrained. So anyway, so years ago, around the time of the Cataclysm, they tried to disappear their mountain, and instead they just created some sort of like fart gas, and so the Slamnik Knights like helped them, and ever since then they've been like allies. So then Fizban, we jump like ahead a little bit, like a day or like later that day, and Fizban and Tasselhoff are visiting the gnomes, and specifically this gnome named Nash. We learn a little bit more about the gnomes, see their city. They eventually get taken over the dragon orb. The gnomes were doing some experiments, trying to learn more about it and whatnot. And then Fizban and them talk about how they got to go to Palanthas for the meeting, and they got to take the orb, and that Nash is coming with them. Then at that point, we have like a heart-to-heart with Tasselhoff and Fizban. And Fizban mentions to Tasselhoff that there's two paths. There's an easy one, but that path ends in misery, and then there's a dark path with many hardships, and that people will die. But that path leads to victory and peace. A couple of people... And then he mentions like a couple people will determine the fate of the whole world. And then Tasselhoff is like having like a real emotion moment here, and he cries, and Fizban like hugs him and like pats his back because he knows that he's going to lose some of his friends, and it's not like a good time had by all. A bit later, Gunther is preparing for the Council of Whitestone, and then we learn about the history of the stone. The stone apparently was set up by the original gods, the true gods, as a sacred place for the Slamnik Knights, and that they have a lot of councils there with advisors from the elves and the mountain dwarfs. But the elves and the mountain dwarfs they're not like participating members, they're like observatory members, but then like the hill dwarfs and some other human groups are actually like voting members of like the council or whatever. Anyway, the last one was right before the first book started, and it was a complete disaster. So like it was going to be, so it was like it had all the groups, the mountain dwarfs, hill dwarfs, and all that stuff, and then they were all swearing different things, and the elves were fighting and demanding things, and it was just like a complete waste of time. Anyway, but this time it's just going to be the humans and like the Sylvanesti and Qualinesti elves, or not even the humans, like the Slamnik Knights, because the dwarfs have been completely unreachable. I think it was the mountain dwarfs are unreachable, and then the hill dwarfs, or I might have got these mixed up. They're busy fighting the High Lord, and so they can't make it over here. They also learned that Derek's crew got turned back from Palanthas, and that they had to go to like the High Clerist's Tower because the Palanthians want to parley with the Dragon Lords instead. And so they're guarding the pass in there to make sure that to protect Palanthas. When the elves show up, Elliston goes to visit Gunther. The elves want the orb or war. He tells Gunther that evil will always turn on itself, and that he really shouldn't worry so much about the High Lords because that situation is gonna like resolve itself. He then pats him on the back and leaves. At the council, Fizban, Tasselhoff, there's like some words, and people are really angry and stuff. Fizban, Tasselhoff, and Nash have shown up. They talk a lot about war, and then at some point Tasselhoff's like had enough, and he tells them, he like curses them out and yells at them, and he's like walking, and then he takes a dragon orb and smashes it to pieces on like the white stone, and then everyone's like, kill him. And Kender's like, time to die. But then Fizban's like, stop it. And he puts everybody in their place. He like shuts it all the fuck down. He then tells them that the dragon orb being destroyed finally gave them hope back because it was driving them like mad and causing all sorts of problems. He then loses his hat as he's like leaning against a stone, which is like blasphemy. And then he crawls away, and right as he crawls away, a huge like dragon lance like pierces the white stone, completely destroying it. And it's Theron and Lorana. And then Theron pulls the lamps out of the stone and declares that this is a dragon lance. And then he spent a month making them with silver from Huma's grave. And this is how they will fight back. A bit later, Lorna is thinking to herself how she wants to go find Tanis, but then she gets stopped as she needs to go help Sturm. Let's see. They have a letter. Oh, okay. Wait. Okay, so Lorana goes with the dragon lances and Tasselhoff, I think, to deliver the dragon lances to Palanthas, and they also bring a letter with like this Flint and Lorana and everybody swearing that Sturm did not do any of the things Derek said, and this letter is going to like completely destroy Derek. Yeah, I think it's just Tasselhoff and Flint go with her. Gilthanas is like missing with Silvara, and Lorana knows where he's at, but she's not going to tell her dad or us. And then but before she leaves, she's able to convince the elves to help Thorin like with crafting dragon lances. Fizban then meets up with Elistan, and they have like a fun conversation. It's very cryptic, but then Elistan's like, I know you. And Fizban's like, oh, I know you too. Teehee. Back over with Tanis and company, Raceland and Tanis are having a good old talk about spells, about Raceland's trances. I mean, they kind of talk about it. And they talk about how they need to head to Palanthas to get a spell or something. Right now they're in Flotsam, and then they want to go to Sandcrisp, but first they need to go to Palanthas or something. And then, so they don't really come to terms with exactly what they need to do there. Kerman and Tanis go and get some armor by attacking some of the Dragon High Lords like men, because they're completely ruling over Flotsam, so they can get around better. And then they go meet with this boat captain, and she's pretty cool. She's like a pirate queen. So she's like, yeah, I'll take you to wherever. But, and then at some point, Tanis is like, man, if she could fuck this boat, she'd do it. Kerman then heads back, and for some reason Tanis doesn't. He like wants to go do some stuff. He then gets attacked by an elf, and he's like, no, I'm an elf too, but because of the beard, doesn't believe him. And then he gets saved from like having to fight the elf by Kitiara. Holy shit. And we find out that Kitiara is actually the Blue Dragon High Lord the whole time. Wow. So it was a woman the whole time. And not just any woman, Kitiara, the love of Tanis' life, kind of. Also, Lorana's also love of his life. In any case, I didn't bring this up, but the whole time you're like, oh, it's pretty obvious it's Kitiara. Like, who else could it fucking be? Anyway, she's super horny, so they fuck. And they chat, and they fuck some more. She talks about she's here in Flotsam to find the Green Gemstone Man, and Tanis is like, oh, the Green Gemstone Man, Baron. I saw that guy on that ship. He doesn't tell her that because he's like, oh, fuck. And then he starts to remember even more. Like, he saw him in Pax Tharkas, and they fought there, and then he saw him here, and he's like, ooh. And so she, like, says all these like really flowery words and whatnot, and he becomes very tempted to like join sides with Kitiara and the evil Dragon Queen, but he knows that it's like the easy and selfish thing to do, and he decides that no, he doesn't want to do that, but he will fuck her again. Anyway, back in Palanthas, things are super bleak. Derek has gone completely out of his fucking gourd. He's isolated the knights by continuously fighting with the people at Palanthas, so they're stuck in the High Clerist Tower, which is the last line of defense against the dragon armies. And the Palanthians had like an army of like 1,000 or 2,000, and the knights had like an army of 1,000. So with that, they could have easily defeated like the dragon high lords, but with only half the army, it's not so good. Anyway, we find out that it's the Blue Dragon army that's here, and from like one of Kitiara's men. She was like chilling, getting ready. She was like, we're just gonna like siege them and like let them starve to death. And then she got word from Taxis, or the evil queen, that she needs to go find the Green Gemstone Man. And so she told like her subordinates, like, hey, just wait here, I'll be back. And then right before they're able to like close out the siege, Lorana and her contingent show up with some food and everything, and they vindicate Sturm, and then Sturm becomes like the new leader of like the knights and all that stuff. And then Lorana sticks around to help train the knights in the use of the dragon lances. But there is no more supplies, so it's cold, it's winter, people are starting to get like very concerned, and then they kind of forget about the lances, and the situation seems extremely hopeless. At this point, we get some like rundown about the tower. It was built as a refuge and a holy site, and that later defenses were put up. that this is where the knights are, and that no one has headed into like the original tower because it's sacred or something. At some point, Flint mentions that the defenses here are really weird because it seems to be set up to keep people like in, not keep people out or something. At some point, Tassoff wanders around the tower because, of course, he does, and he mentions the same thing. He's like, "Oh, it's really weird that it's so easy to get in here, but I can see it being tricky to getting out." Just in case you missed Flint talking about it like 5 seconds beforehand. He then finds something very important. We then switch back over to Sturm. Sturm's having a big argument with Derek. Derek thinks he's still in charge. He's like, I'm going to go attack Dragon High Lords before they can do anything. The Dragon Army, and Sturm's like, that's a really bad idea. Derek's like, I don't give a fuck. And he gets like really arrogant, and he says, as soon as we get back, I'm going to have your head for disobeying me. And this time, there's no elf maiden's going to help you. So the next day, the knights ride out, except for the Crown, Order of the Crown, which is Sturm's crew that he's in charge of. And then they all like yell and stuff. And then at some point, Storm's like, fuck the order. Then the night, they leave. And then over at the Dragon Army camp, Kittiar is like fuckboy who's in charge. He gets news the knights are coming out, and he's like super excited because they're going to massacre the shit out of them. He then sends word to Kittiar to come back. The knights get slaughtered, and the fuckboy brings Derek and Albert back. Albert is headless, and Derek is bleeding out and like out of his fucking gourd, like even more so. He tells the knights to surrender. Lorana shoots him with the bow, and she's like, go fuck yourself. And he's like, we'll be back tomorrow, and we're going to kill the shit out of you. And the Tassoff kind of freaks out. He mentions that he found a dragon orb, another one, and he's all super concerned because he destroyed the last dragon orb, and he was concerned that dragon orbs themselves are evil and something. So he shows it to Lorana, and he says that he can read it with his glasses, so she tells him to do it. And they find out the orb is not good or evil, and that they will clearly need it to fight the dragon armies. The next day, the siege begins. They survive, but half the defenders are dead. Like half the knights that stuck around and whatnot dead. And there's no time to bury the dead. Tassoff gets like super excited because he's never been in a siege before, and Tassoff... and everyone's like, oh my gosh, dude, chill. Oop. What the fuck? Sorry, I lost my thing for a second. Okay. Sturm is able to rally his men, and then the companions talk about the dragon orb, about the lances, and then the next day, the army that is attacking them, the dragon army, is like retreating, and they're like, why would they do that? And it's because, dun dun dun, there are dragons coming, and they're like, fuck, we have to use the orb now. So Tassoff has figured out how to use it. He's taught Lorana. And then they figured out the purpose of like the outward facing gates. And so Sturm is like, all right, Lorna, you're in charge. I'll go distract the dragons long enough for you to like use the dragon orb, and then we can kill the dragons and make sure we can like be victorious. And so he's off to stop the dragons, so they have time to prepare. The knights all grab their lances, they head in to like set up the trap, and then Tassoff and Lorna go to get the orb. So time climbs up the tower. Lorna and Flint both recognize that Sturm is definitely going to die. And then he hails the dragon. Night Lord recognizes it's Kittiara. Oh, no, he doesn't know that it's Kittiara, sorry. She recognizes him, but she doesn't say anything. So she charges at him. He shoots the dragon with a bow, striking it and causing a wound. And then he stabs the dragon as well, wounding it even more. And then Kittiara pierces him with a spear. Lorana sticks around long enough to watch Sturm die as the knights are like preparing for the trap. And then she grabs the sword, his sword that fell, his family heirloom sword, and she heads inside to the dragon orb. She then battles with it just like Raceland as the dragons are like blasting apart the tower. And then Tassoff's getting super concerned because he's watching her struggle. And then at the last second, she like wins. And then the dragons go like mad, and the orb like summons them. So they both like so there's 3 dragons. So there's Kittiara's dragon, who's like, she's able to like rein him in with the massive force. But the other 2 dragons like race inside of the trap. Also, all the draconians in the army that are around, they go completely out of their fucking gourd. The goblins like freak out about this, and they all run away. And the humans, who are confused, and they have no commanders because the dragon High Lord so Kittiara and her 2 like fuckboys are like getting killed, or Kittiara is like getting the fuck out of there. And so they flee. Let's see, come inside. Oh yeah, they get completely destroyed by the lances, and then the tower collapses. The orb gets lost or destroyed or whatever, and Lorna and Tassoff are barely able to escape. She then goes to get Sturm's body so that the High Lord can't do anything about it, and she takes the dragon lance with her. When she gets up there, she gets accosted by Kittiara. They have some like girl talk about Sturm, about the lance, about the orb, and about Tanis. Kittiara mentions that Tanis is her fuckboy, and then she takes the lance. Says that Lorna has 3 days before she's going to get her army back up and ready to fight, and then she leaves. And right before she takes off, she's like, you know what, keep your fucking lance, and she tosses it back down. And that's the end of the book. But we do get an epilogue. It's the funeral. They get all the knights that died and whatnot, and there's like a special sepulcher in this High Clerist's Tower specifically for the Knights of Solamnia. So then they go and they have like a big funeral. Lorna does like a speech, and then she talks about how she's going to take these dragon skulls and she's going to march into Palanthas and be like, you, and then take the spear, and she's like, you will fucking fight these dragons and you will help and you will not make deals with these assholes anymore. And then she's going to go on like a crusade around the world until all the people unite to fight back against dragon high lords. The knights will cheer. Elsewhere, Alana is scared to leave her home. Like, she intended to like go meet up with her people, but she's still in Sylvanesti all by herself. And then finally she's like, all right, I'm going to do it. And then she feels Sturm die because of like the jewel they shared. And she's like, fuck it. There's no reason to be alive. True love is awful. This world is evil. And there's no reason to like do anything. Fuck humans, fuck elves, fuck everyone. I'm done. And she's like burying the gem thing so she doesn't have to feel it anymore. And then she notices it has like a warm glow and a light, which is like the love of Sturm to her. And like it encourages, it's like the last thing of Sturm, his like resolve. And it kind of bleeds over to her so that to encourage her to continue on and to fight the good fight. And so she's like, I'm going to do it. So then she decides she's going to leave to find her people, and then she's going to force them to join up with the humans to fight all the evil in the world. And that is actually the ending of Dragons of Winter Night, which was badass as hell. And it would be even more badass if they added like another like I don't know, 20 chapters for like the 3 awesome adventures we missed. I think there is a book, I'm trying to recall, where they go and like they fight the White Dragon High Lord and do all that stuff. I'm like, I vaguely remember reading. I definitely remember reading the Dwarven one. There's so many Dragonlance books, like holy shit. And the ones that take place after the events of these books are good and then terrible. But all the ones that take place like before and during, like these extra adventures, are pretty good from what I remember. Anyway, we're gonna get to Dragons of Spring Dawning next. I think that's what it's called. But yeah, go ahead and like, share, subscribe, comment, and I will catch you guys later. Bye.